Mom said. "You're a disgrace to this family." And my sister laughed. I quietly left the room and booked a flight. 2 weeks later they begged me to come back It was the mashed potatoes that did it. I know, strange thing to remember when your whole life changes in a single evening, but that's what I was scooping onto my plate when my mother's voice sliced through the air like a jagged shard of glass. "You're a disgrace to this family." I stopped mid-scoop. The spoon clinked against the ceramic bowl. My sister, Melanie, was already mid-chuckle, one of those sharp, performative laughs she'd perfected over the years. My father didn't even look up. He just chewed his roast and scrolled through his phone like someone watching a scene he'd already seen 100 times. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask her what I'd done to deserve it this time. I already knew the script. I was 31, single, working from home on something silly and unstable. According to them, a tech startup that had drained my savings and strained my patience, but that I believed in like a religion. My brother was a corporate lawyer. Melanie a surgeon. I was the lost one. The air felt syrup thick. Everyone stared at me like I should yell back, fight, defend myself. But I didn't. I stood. Calmly folded my napkin. Set it beside my plate. Melanie smirked like she'd won. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. Didn't scream or cry or throw a dramatic look over my shoulder. I just left. Drove home in silence. Packed a small bag. Opened my laptop. And by midnight I'd booked a flight. To San Francisco. Not to escape. No. I wasn't running away from them. I was running towards something they never believed I could reach. I landed in San Francisco with nothing but a carry-on, a laptop, and 2 years of unfinished code buried in GitHub repositories. I hadn't been here since college, since I was the awkward, quiet kid who never spoke up in lectures, but aced every exam. Back then, I watched from the sidelines as classmates went on to launch startups, raise capital, make headlines. I stayed behind. Fear, maybe. Loyalty to a family that never really saw me. But that night, 2 hours after touching down, I sent a message. It was to Jonah Blanche, an old roommate from freshman year, now CTO of a mid-sized firm known for acquiring tech talents before they blew up. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. But he replied in 5 minutes flat. "Tom? Dude. Weird timing. We've been looking for something exactly like that platform you described. Come by tomorrow?" I slept maybe 3 hours in a friend's Airbnb and walked into Jonah's office with the kind of anxiety I hadn't felt since presenting in high school. I opened my laptop, clicked through a crude prototype of a platform I'd been building in secret. An AI model tailored for small to mid-sized legal firms, something between automation and personalized case prep. Not flashy, but deeply useful. I called it Nestor. He stared at the screen. Then back at me. "You built this solo?" I nodded. "Nights and weekends." He laughed. "You're either completely insane, or a genius." 3 hours later, we were drafting an acquisition deal. I'd retain ownership, but they'd fund it, develop it, and roll it into their legal tech suite. He offered me equity, a CTO title, and something else I wasn't prepared for. Validation. For the first time in my life, someone outside of me saw the potential I had always believed was there. 2 weeks. That's how long it took to go from disgrace to headline. And then? My phone rang. Not Jonah. Not investors. It was my father. Panicked. Begging. The first time he called, I let it ring out. The second time, I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the red button. The third time, I answered. "Tom." His voice was tight, urgent. "We need to talk." I said nothing. "There's been a situation," he continued. "I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't serious." Still, I waited. Let him sit in the silence he'd given me for most of my life. "It's about the firm," he finally said. "There's been a major leak. One of our clients is suing. Melanie. Melanie's at the center of it." That got my attention. "What kind of leak?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He exhaled. "Emails. Patient files. Confidential data." They're claiming gross negligence and malpractice. My sister, the golden child, caught in the kind of scandal that would crater a career. And what does this have to do with me? There was a pause. Then came the real reason for the call. We heard about your new venture. The AI software. Jonah's press release was everywhere. People are calling you a rising name in legal tech? We thought. He hesitated. We thought maybe you could help. Help. They had tossed me aside like junk in a drawer. Now I was a shiny tool they suddenly remembered they needed. I almost laughed. You think I'll just sweep in and fix this? We're desperate, he said. Please. There it was. The word I'd never heard from him. From any of them. Not. We're sorry. Not. We were wrong. Just. Please. I hung up without another word. Then stared out the window of my new office, the city buzzing beneath me, and realized something cold and sharp settling in my chest. They didn't want me. They wanted my success. But for the first time in my life, I got to decide what happened next. I waited 3 days before I responded. Not because I needed time to think, my decision was already made the night he called. I just wanted them to sweat. On the 4th morning, I sent a single text. I'll come. But only on my terms. No reply for 2 hours. Then finally. What terms? I typed slowly. Everyone in the room. Mom, Dad, Melanie. I want a meeting. Face to face. Done. My father responded almost immediately. Of course it was. When they needed something, they moved quickly. Shame it never worked that way when I needed them. So the following weekend I flew back. Same airport. Different man. I wore the blazer Jonah had handed me after our first press junket. My name was now listed in legal tech articles. My LinkedIn was flooded with requests. I didn't just walk into that house, I arrived. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Funny how that happens when your world expands. I rang the doorbell. No one opened it. But when I pushed the handle, it was unlocked. Typical. Inside, they were all there. Like actors waiting for their cue. Melanie looked pale, her posture brittle. My mother stood behind the kitchen island, arms crossed, eyes flicking over me like I was some stranger. My father sat stiffly in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table like a man who hadn't quite decided if he was still in charge. I set my bag down, took off my coat and sat. And for the first time in my life, they waited for me to speak. I took my time. Then I said, let's get one thing straight before we begin. I'm not here to save you. I'm here to make a deal. The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. Melanie blinked first. What kind of deal? She asked, voice taut. I turned to her. The kind that comes with conditions. You want my help? Then things change. Permanently. My mother scoffed. We're your family, Tom. You don't bargain with your family. I looked at her. Calm. Cold. You mean the family that called me a disgrace? Or the one that laughed when I walked out the door? She looked away. I continued. I reviewed the leaked files. Jonah's team forwarded everything. It's bad. Melanie, you're looking at not just a malpractice suit, but potentially losing your license. Her face crumpled for a second. Then she straightened it, the mask sliding back into place. It was an accident. A tech failure. I shook my head. It was negligence. You stored client files in a shared drive. You used your personal email for patient notes. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. You don't need to convince me. You need to convince the board. And they won't care how overworked you were. My father leaned forward. So what's your proposal? Here it was. The moment. I had dreamed of this, not revenge exactly, but clarity. Power. The ability to speak and be heard without interruption, without being belittled or dismissed. I'll fix it, I said. I'll have Nestor sweep your systems, secure your data, and draft a report that proves your office has already begun reform. I'll even coach you through the hearing. Melanie looked like she might cry from relief. But, I said, and the room tensed again. You're going to sign over full rights to the clinic's tech operations to me. Indefinitely. I want it in writing. My father's brow furrowed. That's extortion. No, I said softly. That's a contract. He looked at me then, not like a father, not like a disappointed man staring at a failure, but like someone realizing the quiet one had grown teeth. I'll have my lawyer draft the paperwork. I finished. You have 24 hours to agree. Or I walk. And this time, they all knew I meant it. That night, I stayed in a hotel. They offered me my old room. My mother, with a strained smile, said something about putting the past behind us. I declined. My old room had posters I never picked, furniture I wasn't allowed to move, and a doorknob that never locked right. It had a mirror I once stood in front of for 15 minutes, trying to figure out what they wanted me to be. I wasn't stepping back into that. At the hotel, I ordered room service and watched the city lights blur through the glass. My phone buzzed around 11 p.m., an email from Melanie's attorney. A draft agreement. They were caving. The next morning, I returned to the house. This time, I didn't knock. They were all gathered again, but the dynamic had shifted. My father stood when I entered, not to greet me, but like a man still pretending to hold the high ground. My mother offered coffee. I declined again. Melanie sat with the signed contract in front of her, pen already uncapped. I read it carefully. Every line. Every clause. They had agreed I'd take control of the clinic's digital and tech infrastructure. In exchange, I'd deploy Nestor's services and testify on Melanie's behalf during her review hearing. Limited liability transfer. No backpedaling. All binding. She signed. I took the document, placed it in my briefcase, and looked at each of them in turn. You know, I said, this could have gone a different way. I would have helped, even without this contract, if any of you had just treated me like I mattered. Just once. No one said anything. Melanie's eyes darted toward the window. My father clenched his jaw. My mother, for once, looked genuinely ashamed. But I wasn't looking for apologies. I wasn't looking for guilt, or even revenge. I was looking for the final shift. You don't get to decide what I'm worth anymore, I said. You gave that power away when you dismissed me. When you laughed. When you said I was a disgrace. I stood. This is the last time I walk into this house out of obligation. The next time I come here, if I come here, it'll be as a guest. A respected one. Or not at all. And then I left. This time, I didn't walk out quietly. I walked out as a man who had been underestimated for far too long, and finally knew his value. I didn't hear from them for a week. The silence was louder than their usual criticism. During that time, my world kept moving. Jonah's firm pushed Nestor into beta testing with 2 new clients. I was suddenly fielding interviews, Zoom calls, and one strange request from a legal podcast asking if I'd come on to talk about the overnight rise of Tom Wexler. I laughed at that one. Overnight, huh? Try a decade of invisible grind. Then, midweek, my inbox pinged. Subject: thank you? From Melanie. A single line. The hearing went well. They're letting me keep my license. I know you didn't have to help. No apology. No attempt to explain the years of ridicule or backhanded compliments. But I stared at that message longer than I expected. She was proud. Her whole life had been about achievement and image, and now it was fragile. She was lucky I hadn't let her crash to the ground. Still, I didn't reply. I had no hatred left in me, but no rush to rebuild either. Sometimes a broken bridge needs to stay broken. That Friday, I met Jonah for lunch at a rooftop cafe downtown. He clinked his iced tea against mine and grinned. To the disgrace of the year, he said. I smiled. Feels good to be infamous. He leaned in. By the way, we had a rep from a major legal conglomerate reach out. They want to license Nestor across all their mid-tier offices. That's a 7-figure deal, Tom. I nearly dropped my glass. This was it. Everything I'd built in silence, in doubt, in shadow, finally standing in the sun. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of anxiety, but because victory has a strange silence to it. A hum you feel in your bones more than your ears. It's not cheering or fireworks or sudden bursts of joy. It's stillness. The kind that comes after a storm has passed, when you finally realize the house didn't collapse. The licensing deal went through the following Monday. 7 figures. Jonah negotiated hard, and I played my part, calm and calculated. There was a moment on the final call when the other side asked, "And who leads development on this?" And Jonah simply turned to me and said, "The guy you underestimated." I smiled, shook hands with executives, signed dotted lines, and walked out of the boardroom not just as a founder, but a player. And the funny thing? That was the easy part. The hard part was coming home to an empty apartment, and realizing the people who were supposed to celebrate with you weren't there. Would never be there, not really. I had friends, of course. A small circle of people who'd always had my back. But there's something about familial rejection that lingers even when you win. Especially when you win. You keep asking yourself, do they regret it now? Would they have loved me if I'd succeeded sooner? Would it have mattered? Then came the second email. Not from Melanie. Not from my father. From my mother. Subject: Can we talk? I didn't open it right away. I stared at the preview in my inbox for hours. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading. Another part, the smaller, more wounded part, still hoped for something real inside. Something honest. I opened it around midnight. She wrote, "Tom, I don't know how to say this right, so I'll just try. You've always been quiet, and I mistook that for weakness. Your father, well, he always saw strength in noise. I followed his lead more than I should have. I was wrong. About you. About so much. I saw the article. I saw what you built. And I cried, not because I was proud, but because I realized I never told you I was before. Not once. I don't expect forgiveness. But if you ever come home again, I'd like to cook you dinner. Just me and you. No judgments. No pride. Just a mother trying to understand her son." It hit me in the chest, not because it was perfectly worded, but because it wasn't. It was messy. It sounded like her. It sounded real. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one waiting at the table for someone else to notice I existed. They could wait now. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon when I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. I hadn't planned to visit, it wasn't on my calendar, wasn't part of any grand speech or cathartic ending. I just went. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown. I knocked once. Then walked in. It was the same creak in the floorboard by the entry. Same family portraits on the wall, me, always just slightly off to the side, as if I'd wandered into the photo at the last second. I found my mother in the kitchen. She was chopping onions. When she looked up, she didn't speak. Just blinked rapidly, then reached to turn off the stove. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure I would either." We sat at the table. The same one where, years ago, she'd asked me what I was going to do with my life after college, her tone implying that whatever it was, it wouldn't be enough. Now? She just listened. "I got an offer," I told her. "Another firm wants to acquire Nestor. Big one. 9 figures if I accept." She covered her mouth. 9? I nodded. "I haven't decided yet. Still building. Still growing." She looked down at her hands. "You always were building. I just never saw it." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't the cold kind. It was the kind that settles between people who finally understand there's nothing more to explain. "Why now?" she asked quietly. I could have said 100 things. Revenge. Closure. Curiosity. But none of those were the full truth. "Because I needed to know," I said. "If the door was closed because of me, or because no one ever bothered to open it." Her eyes welled up. "I was wrong," she said. "We all were. But you were stronger than all of us." I stood. I didn't come for an apology, Mom. I just wanted you to see me. She reached out, touched my wrist. I see you now. As I walked back to my car, I passed Melanie's SUV. She wasn't home. I didn't leave a note. She'd know I was there. And for once, she'd know I left on my terms, not because I was dismissed, but because I chose to. It was 6 months later when I stood in front of a crowd of 500, lights warm on my face, a microphone in hand, and the Nestor logo glowing behind me on a stage. I was the keynote speaker at the Future of Law Tech conference. Press badges flashed. Phones recorded. Applause rang out, louder than I could have imagined back when I was debugging code on a second-hand laptop in a tiny apartment with a leaky ceiling. I just walked off stage when Jonah clapped a hand on my shoulder. You crushed it, he said. We just got an email from a European firm. They want Nestor in every office, from Berlin to Milan. I smiled. Let's talk next week. I need a few days off. You okay? I nodded. But there was something else stirring inside me. A strange mix of peace and sadness. Success, I was learning, doesn't fill every hole. It just gives you the light to look at the ones that are still there. That weekend, I visited my father's old office, the one I used to be afraid to step foot in as a kid. The building was half empty now. His company, once a towering reputation maker, had been gutted by scandal after scandal. The recent malpractice incident had accelerated the fall, and the name, Wexler and Associates, now came with an asterisk in legal circles. I had a meeting with the board. They wanted to talk acquisition. A buyout. They wanted me to buy them out. Poetic, right? I sat across from men who had once shaken my father's hand, who had watched me grow up with polite indifference. Now they leaned in, eager, trying to court me like I was some hotshot investor who could save them from a sinking ship. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just slid the offer across the table. $1. They blinked. That's not a serious offer, one of them said. Oh, it's very serious, I replied. I'm not buying your firm. I'm buying the name. And I'm dissolving it. The silence was immediate. Heavy. Uncomfortable. You'll kill the brand. Exactly, I said. I'm burying it. They called me sentimental. Vengeful. Even foolish. But I walked out of that office with the paperwork signed. Wexler and Associates would be no more. Sometimes, peace looks like letting go. Sometimes, it looks like closing the door behind you and locking it for good. A few weeks later, I got a text from Melanie. Just 2 words. Thank you? I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because it was enough. She was rebuilding her life, probably still telling people her brother was a tech genius, as if she hadn't once laughed in his face over mashed potatoes. My mother sent me another email, an invitation to Thanksgiving. No expectations. No pressure. Just food. Just us. I haven't decided if I'll go. I might. I might not. What I've learned is this: closure isn't a big moment with swelling music and tearful hugs. It's small choices. It's control. It's realizing you're no longer seeking the thing you've chased your entire life. Acceptance. Because I don't need it anymore. The world saw me. Heard me. Validated me. But more than that, I saw myself. The quiet one. The failure. The disgrace. He became the man who didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't beg to be understood. He just walked out. And when the world told him it was time to come back, he made them knock first.